Right now, it's November, and for me, that equals lots of budgets. So it's budget season, particularly if you are working for a company that looks at calendar year. And so you're spending a lot of time in the details and a lot of time, as I say, in the weeds. And there comes a point where you need to get out of the weeds so you're better at budgeting. Hi, my name's Alysha Randall, and I am a fractional CFO, but I also train new and aspiring CFOs who work in startup and scale ups. So, if that sounds like you, if you are a mid level or even a senior level accountant working for a startup or scale up, then hit subscribe because this are the kind of topics that I talk about, and they may be quite interesting to you, particularly if you're keen to get to that next level, to that leadership role. So today I just wanted to talk about a small aspect of budgeting. And as I said, it is about getting yourself out of the weeds. So a very good way to start a budgeting process is thinking about what is the vision, what is the mission of the company. And I will say this is something that founders should have already established as they were starting the business, but that's not always the case. So you may be working with quite junior founders or inexperienced founders, and they may not have a clear, defined vision or mission. So maybe long before you have to put a budget together, try and establish what that mission and a vision is with the founders if you don't have one already. The next step is then understanding what the strategic goals are. So what do the founders and potentially the board agree to aiming for over the next couple of years? So it may just be 3 strategic goals, but ideally you want to understand where you're heading and where the company wants to be within 12 months' time. So at the end of next year, where is the business wanting to be? And then off the back of that, you can look for your operational goals. So what does the rest of the business, what are the rest of the leadership team planning on doing next year so that you can hit those strategic goals? Once you've got all that, then you can start with your budgeting, because ideally all of those plans, the role of the budget is to check that those strategic and operational goals make financial sense. And if they don't make financial sense, then you need to tweak often the operational goals or move the strategic goals slightly within reason. So that's the first step. Then obviously you are working on the budget. So that is when you're spending a lot of time looking at the details, particularly if you don't have any FP&A people working for you and you are the one doing all the work. So you really do see every single number in that spreadsheet if you're still using spreadsheets. Just a side note, I was on a CFO panel for fintech and tech startups last week, and I had very seasoned CFOs with me on the panel. And one of the questions was, what budgeting software do you use? And we all kind of laughed nervously and looked at each other, and we realized at the end, within 5 minutes, all of us are still using Excel. So we are all testing and very keen for budgeting software. So anyone who works within budgeting software, I'm looking at you. So everyone's very keen for budgeting software. There are a few softwares out there that I've had recommended to me that we are testing. And if you're interested in the finance tech stack that we use, I'll leave a link to that above and below. At the moment, we are still using Excel just because of that flexibility, just also because the businesses we work with are quite early stage, and often they are pivoting their business model over the next 1 to 2 years. And so really investing in a piece of software for a particular type of business model may not be suitable in, say, 1 to 2 years. So that's where Excel is really powerful. So I will keep referring to, or whenever I talk about budget, I do refer to Excel, but I appreciate that there are budgeting softwares out there that work, particularly for more stabilized business models. However, at this stage, I am still using Excel, but I don't expect that to be forever. I am looking forward to the day that there are much more flexible budgeting softwares out there that can be used for this earlier stage. Anyway, so going back to it, I mean, I would say that these kind of recommendations of getting yourself out of the weeds is really important whether you're using Excel or not. There still is an element of input. There is still an element of reviewing the run rates, reviewing the assumptions. And, this is what you're spending a lot of time on when you're first looking at it. But one of the biggest things that I feel is really important is taking that step back and looking at the bigger picture. And that's for a few reasons. The first one is you want to look at year on year and sometimes quarter on quarter growth or movement. So, for example, if you see the last 2-year actuals or current year, 10 plus 2, so 10 months of actuals and 2 months of forecast, and then looking at the future forecast, you want to see the growth of the revenue year on year. You want to compare that to the margin movements. You want to look at the growth of the overheads year on year. And the reason for this is you want it to ensure that it's reasonable. So in the industries that I work in, it's not unheard of to have up to, I'd say very rarely over, but up to 100% year on year growth. But you don't want your overheads to have, say, 120% year on year growth. This doesn't make sense. And there's a real problem then with your spending. So it's making sure that the revenue growth is greater than all of your expenditure growth. It's also having a look to see if it's reasonable or sometimes whether that is what the management and the board are looking for. So is your year on year growth actually only 5%? Is that enough? Do you expect, particularly if you've established lots of efficiencies or new products or whatever in the current year, then only having 5% year on year growth, is that what you're looking for? Probably not. So you need to revisit that. So having a look at how the numbers move year on year is really important. Another way of stepping out of the weeds and looking at the bigger picture then is also charting the trends. So have a look at the revenue, chart that month on month from, say, 6 months of actuals all the way through the forecast, or 12 months of actuals all the way through the forecast. Does it look like a hockey stick? Does it look like, it's bumbling around and then it just increases like crazy in your forecast? If it does, this hockey stick is not something you see as much anymore. Perhaps in 2020, 21, where the, raising monies was really easy and people were just throwing money at companies, and a lot of the budgets that were delivered during these fundraising processes did look like hockey sticks. But it's probably not reasonable. And so you really revisiting all of the assumptions that create this hockey stick outcome and making sure that it makes sense. It's also looking at the margins as well. So particularly with, say, cost of sales margins and contribution margins, gross profit margins, they shouldn't move too much unless there's a really big incentive put into the business. So I wouldn't expect gross margins to move at all unless there is a reason for it. So whether it's putting in a new piece of machinery, whether it's a contract with a supplier and there's a price change because of volume, or something else, there has to be a reason for gross profit margin to move. So make sure that any movements within the margins, there is a reason for it and you're able to explain why there is a movement. Contribution margin may be slightly less. There is an element of seasonality. So again, any movement in margins, particularly more established business, there should be a reason for those movements. And ideally, that is what the leadership team should be focusing on, is improving those margins and putting in projects to move the margins in a more favorable manner, particularly if you're loss making and moving towards a more profit making or break even business. And then finally, it's revisiting those vision, the mission, strategic goals, and checking that the budget actually makes sense when you're looking at those goals. So does the budget hit those strategic goals? And is it doing it in accordance to the vision and mission? So, for example, one of the missions or visions that I see more and more common, quite rightly, is around sustainability. So it may not just be commercial goals, hitting a certain revenue, hitting a certain profitability. There may be an element of non-financial goals such as sustainability. So you may want to check that any cost cutting or any increase in revenue is done in line with those sustainability goals within the business. So all of those things put together, it gives you a good way of checking at a high level that your budget is making sense. Again, especially after you've spent quite a few weeks going through all the details and the weeds, you really do need to step back and check that the details make sense from a high level. I hope that makes sense and it helps you with your current budgeting process. If you want to check how you're going as far as all of your skills and your knowledge and what you're implementing as far as a finance leader is concerned, we do have a free scorecard where you can check all of the different skills, all of the different requirements of a CFO. It takes about 10 minutes. It's largely just yes, no answers. So you don't have to do any research. You just have to click yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And then you get a scorecard at the end that's based on what you have responded in this quiz. And then you get some free resources off the back of that. So if that sounds interesting to you, then don't forget to click on the link below and hit subscribe as well. And I'll see you next week.